course, comes after weeks of viral videos from a young man YouTuber who was literally creeping around daycares by himself, making claims about fraud that were not there. And then the vice president and the FBI director were retweeting these videos without even verifying if they were true. So we're not accusing people of being xenophobic and racist. They are being xenophobic and racist, including the president of the United States. And I want to say, for one, that I stand with the Somali and the immigrant community standing here today.
Well, we just had one of my Democrat colleagues said these are just opinions. You know, are these guys donating money back to Democrats?
Yes, they are.
I'd like to enter into the record, Mr. Chairman, an article from Breitbart News saying, with the title being Database Searches Show Somali Fraudsters Funding Democrat Politicians. So these aren't opinions.
Without objection.
There's actually reporting on this.
Representative Crane plays a video at a congressional hearing. Minnesota officials confirm stolen taxpayer money when a Democratic campaigns in al-Shabaab, and the Democrat on that panel calls it opinions. Watch what happens next. If you are tired of the media burying stories like this, subscribe right now and join the fastest growing community of informed conservatives holding Washington accountable.
And are you just hearing from Republicans on this, or are Democrat constituents like, oh my God, I'm struggling to put my kids in school, struggling to make ends meet, and my tax dollars are being robbed by people, and then they're sending it all over the place, and this is complete fraud. What is going on, and why hasn't anything been done about it?
I'll give you a personal example. So my family, my in-laws in particular, are politically diverse. A lot of them vote for Democrats, and they're fairly apolitical. They're not like me, all plugged in. And so I kind of use them as a bellwether for what the people are thinking. Across the board, everybody is upset about this fraud.
And I'm guessing when you guys bring this up, whether it's to the Waltz administration, whether it's to the AG, the number one thing that comes back at you is you're a racist, you're a white supremacist, or you're an Islamophobe. As we've seen Governor Waltz now trying to answer for these questions, he's doing it at the national level. Do you guys hear the same thing at the state level as well?
Yes, absolutely. They always pivot to the divisive. As I stated in my opening statement, it's diversion, right? We're going to talk about personalities. We're going to talk about partisan politics. We're going to find some way to get people yelling at each other rather than looking at the problem.
Or, like you've heard my colleagues do on this panel, it's Donald Trump, baby.
Yep.
It's all about Donald Trump, right? The old pivot. We're not going to talk about what's going on in Somalia and not going to talk about what's going on in Minnesota with this massive fraud scandal. We're going to talk about Donald Trump. With my remaining seconds, can we play the video I have, Mr. Chairman?
aad iyo aad aan ugu faraxsanahay in maanta safaari aan soo gaarnay sida dadka badan ay u og yihiin ciyaalkeena yaryar ilaa iyo number la eg 20 milyan oo ciyaal iskooley ah waxay cuntadooda ka helaan iskoolka kaliya marka waxaan fursad u helnay in aan sharci soo gudbino oo la dhahayo Meals Act oo u fududeynayo in waqtigaanay pandemic aan ku jirno oo dhalinyarada iskoolka aynan joogin oo guryahooda ay joogaan aynan gaajoonin oo familkoodii wili ay fursad u helaan in cunto ay helaan oo meelo qaarkood laga qaybinayo ay cuntada ka soo qaadan karaan marka aadaan ugu mahad celinayaa safari in ay tahay meelaha sayti oo diyaarinayo cunto maalin kasto dhalinyarada ciyaalkii iyo familkoodina ku taakuleynaayo cuntada sayti maalintii kaliya safari waxay cunto siisaa 2300 oo ciyaal ah iyo familkooda taas waa mid muhiim ah sida aad u ogtihiin dhalinyaro badan gaajo ku nool wadankaanayti ama familkooda fursad u helin in quraac qada iyo casho ay siiso marka in qadadaasaytii ay meel ka helaan aaday u muhiimsan tahay bishan ramadaanka oo familiyaalkeena badan iyagoo aan shaqo haysanin iyagoo aan taakulayn kale helaynin in aynan ka walwalin ciyaalkooda yaryar sidii ay qada ku siin lahaayeen waa muhiim marka waxaan u mahad celinayaa safaariyo kaleete iyo dadka badan oo maalin ilaahay keeno fursad u qaata in ay u volunteer gareeyaan oo ay taakuleeyaan familiyaalka.
One thing that is so alarming is the reporting that many of these fraudulent companies are then donating the stolen money back to the same Democrats that are protecting them and advocate for these very programs. Is that correct, Mr. Hudson?
I would agree with that statement.
Well, we just had one of my Democrat colleagues said these are just opinions. you know, are these guys donating money back to Democrats?
Yes, they are.
I'd like to enter into the record, Mr. Chairman, an article from Breitbart News saying, with the title being Database Searches Show Somali Fraudsters Funding Democrat Politicians. So these aren't opinions.
Without objection.
It's actually reporting on this. Are you guys aware? You guys are elected officials in Minnesota, right? Are you guys aware of the reporting that some of the stolen money is getting funneled back to the Islamic terror group al-Shabaab in Somalia? Mr. Robbins.
Yes, sir. And we have evidence of it going back as far as 2012, where a man was convicted of sending $21,000 to al-Shabaab. In 2011, 2 Minnesota women were convicted of sending money to different groups. Someone else, we have multiple references of how the al-Shabaab takes a cut when the money gets to Somalia through the Hawala network. So I think there's ample evidence on this and federal convictions.
Yeah. That's outrageous.
Let's talk about what happened when a Navy SEAL walked into a congressional hearing, played a video, and watched the Democrats scramble for the nearest exit. This is not a political drama. This is a fraud scandal with federal convictions, terror financing, and taxpayer money being funneled back into the very political campaigns of the people who were supposed to stop it. And somehow, the Democrats in that room thought the best defense was to call everyone a racist. Here is what you need to know. The hearing was about a massive fraud network tied to pandemic-era food assistance programs, specifically the so-called 10 Million Meals program, which was designed to feed kids during COVID lockdowns. According to testimony from Minnesota officials, shell organizations exploited that program with almost zero oversight. Millions of dollars vanished. And then, in what can only be described as the most brazen political feedback loop in recent memory, the people running those fraudulent operations donated the stolen money back to Democratic political campaigns. When Representative Crane asked Minnesota officials directly whether that was happening, the answer was not complicated. Yes, no hedging, no nuance. Yes. Now, let's pause here and appreciate the sheer audacity it takes to sit on a congressional panel, dismiss documented fraud as opinions, and then have a witness confirm on the record that stolen taxpayer money was funding your party. That is not a talking point. That is testimony under oath. And speaking of opinions, one Democratic member of the panel actually stood up and said, these are just opinions, not the fraud, not the shell companies, not the federal convictions dating back to 2012. Opinions. That was the defense. Meanwhile, Representative Crane was entering Breitbart-reported database searches, court records, and video evidence into congressional record. But sure, opinions. The deflection playbook was running on all cylinders. When the fraud question came up, Democrats pivoted to Donald Trump. When witnesses describe how the response from state leadership always returned to accusations of racism and Islamophobia, the Democratic members in the room demonstrated exactly that in real time. It is almost impressive in its consistency. You cannot accuse someone of using accusations as a distraction while simultaneously using accusations as a distraction. And yet here we are. Now, the detail that should end careers. Testimony confirmed that portions of the misappropriated funds were not just cycled into campaigns. They were routed overseas through informal money transfer networks, with documented evidence of money reaching al-Shabaab, a federally designated terrorist organization. One witness cited a federal conviction from 2012 where a man was convicted of sending $21,000 to al-Shabaab. 2 Minnesota women were convicted in 2011. Multiple prosecutions confirmed the pipeline. This is not a theory. These are federal court records. And the Democratic response? A YouTuber made some unverified videos. That was the response. National security implications, confirmed terror financing, and the rebuttal is a YouTuber. The vice president and the FBI director were retweeting those videos, by the way, which the Democrats flagged as irresponsible. Apparently, fact-checking is optional when it fits the narrative and mandatory only when it challenges it. What this hearing exposed is not just fraud. It is a protection racket dressed up as compassion. Emergency programs with no safeguards. Political leaders who profit from the chaos and then deflect every legitimate question with allegations of bigotry. And a media environment so allergic to this story that a congressional hearing with sworn testimony and federal court records barely registers a headline. This is why channels like this one exist. Because the mainstream media has decided that covering Democrat corruption is not worth the backlash. So we cover it. Republicans in that room pushed through the evasion, entered the evidence, and got the answers on record. That is accountability. That is exactly what Congress is supposed to do. The fraud is documented. The donations are confirmed. The terror financing has federal convictions attached to it. And the Democrats sat there and called opinions. That is the story. Share this video, because someone needs to.